All right, so for today, today's going to be a quicker, see that little trail there. Today's going to be a quicker cardio session, but it'll be a heavier weight training session. So I ended up doing arms last night. I just didn't record it. Did 4 sets of 8 to 12. I don't do arms that often. Sometimes I'll skip them like an every other week thing, only because they get so much, the biceps get so much work during regular activities, lifting weights and back and other exercises that you're doing, that I don't want to overstress the biceps. Plus, I'm not one of those guys that's like, I'm trying to get like huge biceps or something like that. I don't care. As long as they're functional, as long as they work, as long as they're strong, and I avoid injury, that's all I really care about. But today's going to be a shorter cardio session. It's only going to be about 2 miles long. I got this trail that runs down the middle of the HOA. So it's nice. It's still a little bit more flat terrain. I mean, there's a little bit ups and downs, but not too strenuous, not rocky or anything like that. And we'll go all the way one direction. It'll be about a mile. Come back. So this way we warm up the legs and then move on from there. I'm gonna make sure I stretch. I woke up this morning. Feet were a little stiff. Quads are sore. The interesting thing, you would think it would be mostly from going up the mountain. It was mostly from coming down the mountain. So going up the mountain, that's going to affect a lot of the top center of the quadriceps, but going down is really hitting by the knees, and that's the part that's sore. And bodybuilding terminology uses that teardrop looking muscle on the inside of your knee. That's the part that's sore for me. So I'm making sure that I stretch out. Bottom of the feet were a little tender this morning as well. That's something I got to make sure I stay up on top of that, so I don't inflame the bottom of my feet and end up plantar fasciitis again. That was such a pain to get through. I had to go get custom molded inserts for my shoes, and they were just so uncomfortable to wear, and it was just so painful to the touch. But I had to suck it up for at least the first year. Then it started, easing up a little bit, but still, it was not fun. Biggest thing to avoid the plantar fasciitis is stretching. And that's one of the things that I was not doing diligently, is stretching my calf muscles out as much and not stretching out the bottoms of my feet as much as I could. So make sure I stay on top of that, so this way I'm not developing that again. I stretched out just before we took off here. Feeling pretty okay. Again, quads are a little sore, but I'm good. Moving on. So we got these trails here in my HOA. It's not a whole lot. Some people, depending on where you live, I live in Arizona. It's mostly rock landscape, very little trees in most HOAs, unless it's an older established neighborhood. But, we got these green belt areas and trees and trails along them and stuff like that. So I like coming here to do little walks, and if I need to get more, I'll just do more reps, just go back and forth through the neighborhood on this trail here. So makes it a little bit more enjoyable considering how hot it is. We got some cloud coverage today, so I won't be, beamed down by the sunshine. So there's no airflow though. There's no wind whatsoever, but we'll be all right. Okay, another random thought as I'm finishing up. I think I got about a half mile left. I don't know, but thinking about like just training, mind wanders as it usually does. And I'll share this thought with you guys. When it comes to training, self-defense, I'm a big firearms fan. I go to the range once a week, and I do workouts of 150 and 200 rounds, on the pistol, and another, 150, 200 rounds on the carbine. And I've taken quite a few firearms courses as well. There is a difference in the level of training. If you let's just say you want to buy your first handgun, or you already have one, you want to get additional training. Now you can find something like a USCCA certified firearms instructor, and it's going to be a decent course, and hopefully you'll learn quite a bit. And that person is going to be different. Now, we're talking an instructor who's just a firearms instructor and a fan of firearms. We're not talking someone who was former military or law enforcement or anything like that. And you're going to notice a difference from if you go to that regular person compared to you jump it up and you go to someone who maybe has 20, 30 years as a law enforcement officer. And those guys are doing training kind of in their retirement, something like that. You'll get more and, to a point, better information. And if you go somewhere, and that's just like a regular Leo, if we're talking, not someone who is like SWAT, move it up to someone who's been on SWAT team. You know, you're going to learn a lot more information. It's going to graduate based off of their experience. There is going to be, if you talk about the regular just firearms instructor at the USCCA level, which is good, so I'm not crapping on them, and then like the Leo is going to be better. Compare that to you find a group of trainers that were former operators in our military. So tier 2, we're talking Rangers, Green Beret, Navy SEALs, SWIC, MARSOC, those are all tier 2. Okay. You're going to see a huge difference compared to the Leo and the regular firearms instructor, the everyday firearms instructor. Because most of those guys have probably served overseas. They've seen combat, they've been on actual deployments and missions, and they've put bad guys in the ground. So they're going to, a lot of their experience bleeds into their teachings, and you just get better coaching. So for like myself, when it comes to like martial arts and fighting, I have a friend, we've been friends for, we went through we started karate together almost like 6 months apart, and we've been doing the martial arts together for the longest time. There is a huge difference between the knowledge that I possess compared to the knowledge that he's possessed. Now, he's a good instructor, but after a couple of years, I left our first instructor and I moved on to a different art form, and then I moved on to a different art form, eventually getting to a point where I wanted to compete. So I started doing like tournaments, and at one point I was the Arizona State champion in a couple of different events for black belt for my age group. And then I decided to say, hey, let's get on to mixed martial arts, and we started fighting. Ooh, that's a bad shot. But I started competing in MMA. I go to an MMA gym. I go to Siege MMA, and I start training there. And they happen to have a former UFC fighter. Joe Riggs was the head coach there. And regardless of what you think of Joe and his career, it's like the guy still stepped inside that ring. He's been bare knuckle boxing champion. He's been in the UFC. His most famous fights is with Nick Diaz, and it's not even the Nick Diaz fight. It's what happened after the fight in the hospital, which is a funny story, which I sat him down. I was like, hey, tell me about the story. He tells me the story. It's a funny story. But anyways, there is a vast difference in knowledge that I have training with guys who were champions and going to gyms that were champions. So I stayed at Siege for a few years, and then I moved over to the MMA lab. And this was at a time when Benson Henderson was the lightweight champion. And man, the amount of name dropping that I could do right now as far as the people that were coming in and out was just insane. The people that I got to spar and roll with and train with was just so amazing and so much fun. I felt like a fly on the wall because I mean, comparatively, I was not good at all. But I got to train with these people who were the best. So I absorb a lot of knowledge. I am one of those guys who is the epitome of those who can't teach. And, it takes me a long time to get things and to understand things. Eventually I get good at it because on a long enough timeline, everyone else quits. So if I'm still doing it at almost 50 years old, the guy who spent 10 years doing it, but who was good, who quits, like, well, I'm probably better than that guy at this point. But anyways, there is a huge difference in the training that I have had and the knowledge that I have compared to my friend who, after he left, he sought out some coaching here and there, but he just got into teaching, and he's just done that for the last 20 years. And he really hasn't put a lot of effort into, moving on. He never competed. He never fought professionally. He never even did like karate tournaments or anything like that. So it's just a difference in knowledge. And I can take that experience and say, oh yeah, in, this fight that I did here, here's why this technique works, or here's why this theory works, that type of thing, because I have that firsthand experience. It's the same thing with your operators. They're going to have a different experience compared to the Leos and compared to, your everyday average firearms instructor. And then if you happen to be so fortunate to, one, have the financial capabilities to go seek out, or in your area, a tier 1 operator. Now, tier 1 operators in our U.S. military is the unit in the Army, which is Delta Force, but they don't call themselves Delta Force; they call themselves the unit. That's our tip of the spear, tier 1, and then in the Navy, it's SEAL Team 6. Okay, so those guys bring a completely different level of experience and of knowledge compared to, say, the tier 2. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with any of these levels. Any of these levels, you're going to learn valuable information. It's just as you advance, eventually it's going to get to a point where it's like, I need more. I'm still hungry for knowledge. I need more. And it's like, well, then you need to keep seeking someone better. And here's what's funny. When you train with the tier 1 guys, which I've had the fortunate ability to be able to go and train at a couple of seminars here and there with some tier 1 guys. Who do they talk about? They talk about the shooting champions. So they talk about the Michelicks, for example, and they talk about Dan Horner, and they talk about Ben Stoger. And I'm fortunate because Ben Stoger actually teaches here out of Arizona, so that's next on my list to go train with. Now the difference is training with someone, say like Ben Stoger, Dan Horner, or the Michelicks, or something like that. You're going to get a lot of shooting knowledge, but you won't get the combative experience. So you'll get the combative experience with the operators. But anyways, the point is just to keep being hungry for that knowledge and to keep looking for someone who has more knowledge than you do, and then try to go train with them. I did that with the martial arts. I got good at karate, which was my first martial arts, and I'm like, okay, I need something more because I'm actually halfway decent at this. So I switched over and I started studying. At the time, I was very interested in Shaolin Kung Fu because they just were more flexible, more athletic. They were faster. They just had more mobility. And then growing up watching someone like Bruce Lee, who was just very fluid in his motions, like, I want to do that. Well, just any old shitbag kung fu school wasn't good enough. I needed something good. So I started researching, and it was Shaolin that, in my opinion, was probably that, tip of the spear, if you will, for the kung fu world. People will argue, it's debatable. That's fine. I don't care. This is my opinions. So I seek out Shaolin monks, and I go train with Shaolin monks who happen to defect and start up schools here in America. And I do that for quite a while. And then eventually it got to a point where I'm like, all right, well, this is great. And I'm learning some stuff, and, we're doing a little sparring here and there, but it just doesn't. I'm watching UFC. I'm such a fan. And I'm like, well, I want to kind of do what they do. And I remember exactly what it was. It was I think it was UFC 87. It was George St. Pierre versus John Fitch. And I watched GSP, and I'm like, he's the same height as me, roughly. He's the same build, same athleticism, similar backgrounds. I just saw too many similarities, and I'm like, all right, well, let's see if I can do that. So seek out a local MMA gym that was in my area. I was only 3 miles away from my school, so I went and signed up, and I started training there for a few years, and then, it's evolved from there. And I've had the pleasure of training with some really excellent coaches over the years in Kai boxing and boxing and jiu-jitsu, and I've just learned a whole bunch. So keep seeking that knowledge and keep growing and getting better. It's going to keep your body fit, but it's also going to keep your mind sharp. So those are just some of my random thoughts as I walk here today. We're finishing up and coming to the end of it. So I did a little bit extra per my little app on my phone. It says that I'll be finishing up about 2.25 miles today. So that's a good start there. And then second half of this, little later on in a couple hours, we'll go to the gym. We'll do some weightlifting. All right, so we're about to walk into the gym here. Now, the gym that I go to an EOS. I like it. It's inexpensive. It has good equipment, has a pool, has recovery stations. Like, it has some of those tables that gets cold, percussion massagers, has massage chairs, such like that. Overall, I like it. And but there's no recording, so I won't be able to record my workouts or anything like that, but that's okay. I don't need to. But yeah, we're going to do chest today, and I'll talk to you afterwards. Okay, so workout done. Even though they don't have, you're not allowed to record in the gym, they do have these like stalls like the size of a handicap bathroom stall that you're allowed to lock the door. Got a hook over there, and you can do pose downs and stuff like that. It's got the top light so you look better and shit. So we did chest today. So you started off 2 sets of flies, 15 and then 12 because it got heavier, and then I did the decline hammer strength, 2 plates on each side, 3 sets, going from 12 down to 8, and then after that it was dumbbell incline for another 3 sets, and I think I just used 60-pound dumbbells, and because I was fatiguing, it got progressively more difficult. So I think I started off like 11 the first set, 8 the second set, and the final set was only like 6 or something like that. So good chest workout, and then tomorrow's going to be a rest day, so I'll do other things. So until next time.